Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to use the Pythagorean Theorem. Let's get started. Alright, so the question is asking, for the following right angle, find the side length x. Round your answer to the nearest hundredth. So you have, in this question, a right triangle. And in this right triangle, you are trying to figure out what x, or the length of this side is. Okay? So when you do this, it's important to remember that certain things in math have really specific rules. And one of those things that have a whole bunch of specific rules is the right triangle. So you'll hear this one a lot, talking about the Pythagorean Theorem. And it is a very specific rule that is only used with a right triangle. So I put a definition on the side because sometimes they get confused about when to use it. So I'm just going to talk about it. So the Pythagorean Theorem is only used when you have a right triangle and you're looking for the length of one of the sides. Okay. The equation for that is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now, you can see that I sort of highlighted some of this. And a lot of people get confused. They get the a squared plus b squared equals c squared part, but they get really, really confused with everything else. So I'm going to talk about that real quick. So if you notice, I put a squared and b squared highlighted in green. Now, this part, these lengths, you can't just throw in any number into any part of this and expect it to make sense. You have to put specific numbers in the specific place, and it talks about where they are in relation to the right triangle. So when you do this, a squared and b squared are the two parts of the line that make the right triangle. Okay. So for my visual people, I did it in color. I'm going to show you here. So it's the part that makes the right triangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first identify what two parts make the right triangle. Let's say, well, I have the right angle right there. So I know that this part and this part make the right angle. Okay. So a squared and b squared added together is going to be x and 15. So I'm just going to go here and write my equation. So a squared plus b squared equals c squared, right? So I'm going to start filling that in. So that's x squared plus 15 squared. And I'm going to say equals because I'm going to get to the c squared part in a second. Now, some people always ask me, they say, does it matter? Because you have to be very specific. So it says, does it matter what's A and what's B? Once you figure out which side you use for that, it does not matter what is A and what is B. So if I put 15 squared plus x squared on one, it wouldn't make a difference. You were still going to come up with the right answer. But the one thing that you have to have correct, or you're just wasting your time when you're doing this question, is the c squared. Now, the c squared, right here, I talk about is the hypotenuse. Okay. Now the hypotenuse is a very specific part of the right triangle. And you don't really learn the term until geometry, maybe algebra 1. But it's a very, very specific part. Now, some people are like, oh yeah, I get it. The hypotenuse is the hypotenuse. But some people are like, they're all lines. I don't understand. So the way I like to look at it, I'm going to erase this, is that you have this fun little guy over here, right? Your right triangle. I like to envision this as an arrow. Okay. And that arrow is pointing to a specific line. The line that right angle is pointing to is the hypotenuse. Okay. So I'm going to put my 25 squared because that length is 25. And I'm going to put 25 squared in there. So if you can only figure out, Some people are just like, I don't get that hypotenuse thing. But if you can figure out, say, okay, well, if I can get my stuff together, if these two lines make the right triangle, the right angle, right? This part, the only part that's left is the hypotenuse, right? If that's all you can figure out, run with it. If you can figure out, oh, the angle is there and it's pointing to this, and that's all you can figure out is the hypotenuse, run with it. But if you're one of those people that are like, oh, I get it automatically, go with that. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be, because it's already sort of a complex problem to begin with. So once you have that figured out, you can just keep going with the question, okay? Because setting up the equation is sometimes the hardest part. So I have x squared plus 15 squared equals 25 squared. So now you're going to start solving for the question. So I'm just going to say, well, x squared, I don't know what x is yet. So I'm just going to say x squared plus, I'm going to put it in here because I'm not going to tell you guys the wrong answer, because that would be embarrassing. So 225. So 15 squared is 225. Notice that I'm just inputting it here. Equals 25 squared. And that is 625. Now, if you remember, when you're solving for a variable being a letter that you're trying to figure out the value of, you have to get x by itself, or whatever the variable is, which in this case just happens to be x. So when you're looking for that, you're going to say, okay, well, I need to get x by itself. So what is not x? This is not x, and it's on that same side. You need to move it to the other side. All right, so I'm going to say minus 225. So I have x squared equals 400. Okay. In a previous video, I talked about how when you have this, the opposite of a square is the square root. So when I do this on both sides, x is by itself, and then I put in the square, I'm going to get this right, 400. Square root of a 400 is 20. Okay. Now, x equals 20. So once you get the question set up, solving isn't all that difficult. Okay. Just remember, because some people, they get to this part, they get to the x squared equals 400, and they're like, x equals 400. I'm like, no, that's not right. Remember, you have to get x. You're solving for x, not x squared, x. Okay. And if you get to x squared, all you have to do is find the square root of that. Now, notice that it says the nearest hundredth. Sometimes it's not going to be a pretty whole number. Sometimes it'll give you an answer that has decimal points, and you're going to think you got it wrong, but you probably have it right as long as you're following the rules. Now, for this question, I would always suggest to use a calculator. There's very few people that are going to be like, you need to do this by hand. So as long as you're doing the process correctly, personally, that's all I care about. As long as you understand how to solve it, you should be fine. So if you guys would like to see another question like this one, drop it in the comments and we'll talk about it. So good luck, and let me know if you need more help.